Okay, we're going to get right to it now. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening from wherever in the world you're joining from. Thanks for making the date with us. My name is Abiodun Odunuga. I'm a development consultant, work with startups, multinationals and organizations vested in entrepreneurship within the African and European ecosystem. I'm also a lecturer on entrepreneurship with schools across Europe and Africa on entrepreneurship and sustainable development. I'm the co-founder of Friends of Nigeria and the vice president of Friends of Nigeria. Friends of Nigeria is a foremost diaspora organization headquartered in France, and that facilitates socioeconomic relations between Nigeria and French and other European stakeholders. We have a flagship event called Spotlight Nigeria, which is an annual event that brings top leaders from across the public and private sector to Paris on an annual basis to discuss on business engagement and also seal partnership deals. Friends of Nigeria also boast of a crucial mass of Nigerian professionals, not just in France, but across Europe, and entrepreneurs who leverage on our network to be able to change the brain drain narration by fostering sustainable development in Nigeria, as well as also contributing back to our local communities abroad. With me here is, I call him a veteran, who is the guest speaker for today, a veteran in the diasporan field, Kingsley Aikins. I'm just going to make a brief intro about him and then we get right into it. So Kingsley Aikins is the CEO of the Networking Institute based in Ireland, which is a consultancy and training company that delivers online and offline courses in networking, philanthropy, fundraising, and diaspora engagement. Kingsley is an economics and politics graduate of Trinity College Dublin. For 10 years, he's worked for IDA Ireland and the Irish Trade Board and was based in Sydney, Australia, and was responsible for attracting foreign direct investment into Ireland and promoting Irish exports. He then ran Ireland's largest diaspora organization, the Ireland Funds, based in the US. During his 21 years running the Ireland Funds, over $250 million was raised for projects of peace, culture, and charity in Ireland. And since returning back to Ireland to live in 2010, he established the Networking Institute. And Kingsley and his colleagues have worked with over 30 countries, regions, and cities, helping them develop strategies to connect with their diasporas. He developed the concept of diaspora capital that is made up of three flows: the flow of people, knowledge, and money. He has written and spoken extensively on the topic around the world. He lives in Dublin with his wife and three children. Hello, Kingsley. Happy to have you here.
Hey, Abby, thank you very much. I got to say, that was the most flourishing introduction I've ever heard from me. But I have to admit, it was the one I sent you last week. So thank you.
A pleasure. How is it today? Is there confinement back in Dublin? When confinement right now in France, as of today? What's it like with respect to COVID vaccine and all of that?
It's not great. You know, we're now in lockdown situation. We can't go anywhere. We can't really visit anybody. Everybody's pretty tired and weary of it, but a little bit nervous about what's happening out there with these new strains. So it is a bit of a challenge. And you know, I got to say, I'm struggling a little bit. The only good thing is the clocks go back or spring forward, and the days are getting longer and a little bit more sunny, and that's kind of nice.
Indeed, yeah. We're hoping the vaccination takes you know, a rapid move across Europe too. Yeah.
Sure.
So thank you everyone for joining once again from across Europe, from Africa, from Latin America, from the US. It's a privilege to have all of you around. So we'll waste too much time. We'll get right onto the discourse of today. Based on the publicity materials that were shared, the focus for the discussion is clear. We have narrowed down the discourse to four major themes. And the first is locating the diaspora. The other one is engaging the diaspora productively. The third theme we'll be looking at today is understanding diaspora funding. And then the last discourse, or the focal point for today's discourse, is on sustaining diaspora impact. So before we get into these four themes, I think it makes sense to start from the basics. You know, just to put this, you know, in view, the diaspora was a country today it will be the 5th largest in the world. So if we have countries at top, diaspora will be the 5th largest in the world. And so to start from the basics before we go into the discourse for today, I would like to ask Kingsley, why does the diaspora matter?
Wow, great question. Great question to start today. And I think I'll respond by reflecting what you just said. In the year 1990, there were 150 million people living outside the country they were born in. Today, that is 280 million. And if we continue that trajectory by the year 2050, it'll probably be 400 million people. So that's kind of really significant. So it's a significant size and growing.
Yeah.
But what makes it so important now is technology and communications have kind of changed everything. So now we're in contact instantaneously with anybody, anywhere in the world. What you just said about your people from all around the world is incredible. So your diaspora now, it reflects what we call a certain soft power that a country has.
Yeah.
And the soft power was written by Professor Joseph Nye of Harvard, said it's the ability for a country to get what it wants through attraction rather than coercion. So now I think there's an interesting concept out there that we think about, certainly in Ireland, that we have the state of Ireland, which is lines on a map, and then we have the nation of Ireland, which is a global notion. Yeah. And that's not lines on a map, that's all over the world. And I think we're seeing that more and more. With my colleague, Dr. Martin Russell, here in the Networking Institute, we've worked with over 30 countries. Yeah. And this has just accelerated in the last few years. We're not only working with countries, we're working with regions. Yeah. We're working with cities. We just did a job last year for the city of Copenhagen. You know, we work with different regions like the Basque Country or Catalonia or the different counties in Ireland. Yeah. And we make quite a broad definition about diaspora. You know, it's obviously countries have diaspora, regions have diasporas, cities have diasporas, institutions have diasporas, like, for example, universities have diasporas. Companies, this is a really interesting one. Companies have diasporas. The most powerful company diaspora in the world is McKinsey, who have 30,000 people who used to work for McKinsey. They've left, they're working for other companies, but McKinsey keep in touch and connect with them all the time. And guess where they kind of give support back to McKinsey. They make references and referrals to McKinsey. And then I also think sports teams have diasporas. You know, I'm sure you're very passionate about the Nigerian soccer team. I'm passionate about the Irish rugby team. People are passionate about the Boston Red Sox or Manchester United.
I'm a Chelsea fan, by the way, Chelsea FC.
Chelsea. Well, I even know people support Tottenham Hotspur. That's my friend Martin does. So I think that's fascinating if we open our eyes and take a broad definition of the term.
Yeah. Indeed. I think you already said it's on for today's discussion. And I think for most of our audience, probably it's the first time they're probably getting to hear that diaspora goes beyond countries having members, but also cities, football clubs, companies like McKinsey do have diaspora members too. I think that's probably an insightful one for most of our viewers today. So just to jump into the first major part of the pillar for today's discussion, on this webinar today, we have loads of representatives from different agencies, organizations across the world working with the diaspora. And one major challenge from experience that most of these institutions have is how to actually reach or gather or find the critical mass of people we're looking at today, the African diaspora. So my first question to you would be, how can the diaspora be located? Where are they and how can we find them?
Well, you know, that is the number one question. That is the $64,000 question about diaspora. You can boil it down to one sentence about diaspora. Who are they? Where are they? And what are they doing? And you know what, Abby, most people don't have the answer to that question. If you were to ask, for example, does anybody know where all the Nigerian doctors are in the world, or accountants, or vets, or people specialists in advertising, or nobody has that information. No. That's one of the great challenges. No. So your question is, how do you solve that question? I think you probably solve it through technology. For example, you know, we all know LinkedIn, and I'm sure you're on LinkedIn. I know you're on LinkedIn. 750 million people around the world have told this company, here's my education details, here's my work experience, here's my hobbies, this is who I am, and you can have it, and you can have it for free. Yeah. And I've always found free a very compelling price point, a very interesting price point is free. And that is extraordinary, and that is unique, and that's never happened before. So that's one opportunity, which kind of is a subset of just in general technology. I'm a great fan of a guy called Elion Cassana in Namsor in Paris. So he's there, and he's an expert in digging into big data. And he's a specialist in the area of onomastics, which is actually being able to track people by their surname, by their names. As you know, people have very distinctive names. There are not very many Murphys in Nigeria. They're all here in Ireland, right? So, and you know, we don't have very many people with your name in Ireland. So that's interesting. That suddenly big data and technology is allowing you to answer that question. So I think the answer is a high-tech answer, but also it's a low-tech answer, which is, you know, it's the clubs, societies, organizations. It's those network, that kind of fabric, that mosaic of activities and events and people and organizations, which often are very small, and there's lots of them. For example, Mexico has 500 hometown associations throughout the United States. Wow. And that's where people in, say, Los Angeles who are from Guadalajara, they all connect. And it reinforces something very important about diaspora engagement. It's not about country, it's about place. And people are often very passionate about a particular place, and they have no interest in the other place. So what is the driver in all of this? The driver in everything to do with diaspora is having a sense of belonging. Such a powerful thing. We like to belong to well, sports teams we talked about, or belong to companies, or belong to universities, or belong to regions or cities or places. But I think it's important to realize diaspora is about place. That's a really key factor.
Wow, interesting. Diaspora is about place, not just people. And just to, you know, touch on what you mentioned about technology, for facts, we also know very well Namso, Elian, with his team, you know, using the FBI magnets, using a software approach to be able to help countries to target their diaspora. And currently on, you know, we have talks and partnerships with respect to how that French startup or company could be able to work with the Nigerian government to help us reach out to more of our diaspora members. And that discussion is still quite ongoing. So I just wanted to make reference to that, that's indeed a very good way to go. Thank you for spotlighting, you know, the place of, you know, entrenching diaspora with respect to finding local hubs, with respect to social communities, and also leveraging on technology. Now going into a major part of today's discussion, which is the second pillar, I want to make a reference to a publication that was made by the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, in partnership with the Migration Policy Institute, MPI. And that publication was tagged developing a roadmap for engaging diasporas in development. And in the opening chapter, it reads thus, that there's no roadmap that can be a one-size-fits-all model for governments working to engage their diasporas more effectively. Each diaspora has a unique set of needs and capabilities based on their historical experience and their present realities today. So government must approach and reflect these complexities. So I would like to ask you, Kingsley, what are the key factors for diaspora engagement in your opinion?
Well, I think that's a really, really important point. I mean, I sometimes say that diasporas tend to be distant, diffuse, diverse, and disputatious, you know, so all the Ds. And this notion that there's one large diaspora and they're all kind of similar people is just not true. I mean, these people didn't like each other when they lived in their home country. Why should they like each other? So, you know, that's human nature. And one of the, I have we might get to talk to it later, one of my most popular papers is called Why Diaspora Initiatives Fail. And one of the reasons is because they all fight a lot. They dispute. Wow. But that's kind of human nature. You know, that happens in the home country. It happens in the host country. There's lots of kind of reasons for that. But I think that the general point you make is very well taken, is that there is no homogeneous I often say there is no such thing as a Nigerian diaspora. There's hundreds of Nigerian diasporas. And you need, as a government, as an organization, to be flexible enough, to be understanding enough, to be able to build relationships with different types of people. And they've all got different interests. And, you know, you always remember, you know, the big driver in a lot of this is self-interest. You know, people, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. I mean, I think it was Bill Gates said the other day that the two things that drive mankind, he said, is helping others and self-interest, which is a lovely contradiction in a funny sort of way. But, you know, I do think that's a powerful motivator, and finding out what are the buttons to press, what are the things that are of most interest is really important. And I think we've all learned probably over a long period of time, and I think it's very interesting to watch what India did in this space, that the most important thing to develop a strategy with your diaspora is to listen to your diaspora, to really, really listen to your diaspora. Because a lot of diasporas think the only reason the home country are connecting with us in the diaspora is because they want money. They want our money to do something with. And they resent that and they reject that. And there's often a lot of emotional baggage. Very often diasporas have had to leave and they blame the home country, or they don't trust the home country, or there's political issues going on. So there's lots of other dynamics in there, but I think your general point is completely correct.
True. Speaking about trust, which is a major factor, you know, I saw a funny quote one time that trust is like an eraser, and it gets smaller and smaller after each mistake. So if we actually attempt to benchmark the trust capital of some African governments with respect to their diaspora, I think some already they've gone bankrupt. So now the question is, how does government help instill confidence and trust back into the diaspora members? How do you think the governments will be able to win back this trust?
Well, you know, put it in a broader environment, Edelman, who are the world's largest communications company, every year do what they call the Edelman Global Trust Survey. And they found that globally, trust in four institutions, governments, nonprofits, media, and business, is at its lowest level in recorded history.
Wow.
So we are very distrustful as people of those big institutions out there. So first of all, what is trust? I mean, trust is doing what you say you're going to do over and over and over again. So you become consistent and you build a reputation for trust. And it can take years to build and can be lost in a second. So it's a very fragile flower, the flower of trust, but critically important. So your question to me was, how do governments engender a relationship of trust with people in their diaspora? And I think the answer is that goes back to possibly the previous answer. They genuinely listen to them. They don't see them as just purely a source of revenue and money. And they realize that they have to serve them. You know, serve, not sell is the kind of, I think, the mantra. They have to serve these people in some way. They have to add value to the relationship. They have to be seen as benign and good and decent brokers. Because that's the role that they have. And governments are very important because they have a network of consulates and embassies around the world with professional staff. You know, they're in a position to make things happen. They're funded, they've got money and resources. So in a way, it's very important. But here's a bigger question. In diaspora engagement, what's the role of government? Should governments be facilitators or should government be implementers of diaspora engagement? And sometimes for some countries, if the government are the implementers, the people don't trust them. They don't respond to them. So that's always an interesting debate as to what the balance lies. In some countries, the market doesn't deliver. So governments have to intervene and actually produce and deliver and put in place procedures and policies and programs. And in other places, the policy would be, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let lots of things happen. Some will win, some will fail. Let the market determine it. And the answer, you know, my answer, having worked with lots of countries, is you need a bit of both, you know? You need to have a government involvement and engagement, but you also need great privately run, you know, independent nonprofit organizations.
Beautiful. Speaking about nonprofits, let's now shift a bit from the public actors now to diaspora organizations amongst themselves. You did mention that the reason why most diaspora initiatives fail is because they fight a lot. And speaking from the Nigerian experience, most people probably would not know, but beyond Friends of Nigeria, in France, we do have over, I think, 30 other Nigerian organizations who are also diaspora organizations. Um, and I must confess, it's quite hard to get everybody on the table to agree on some things. In your own experience, have you ever had to work with a multicultural diaspora country like Nigeria, where they had breeds of or shades of different diaspora organizations with different goals? And in your own experience, how do you ensure all of these agencies or associations come together and be able to work together to achieve a common goal?
I think with one exception, it's possible. The one exception is when politics it plays a role, and when you have people who have very different political agendae, and that is often a problem. Institutions and organizations get infected by people with political views, and that can lead to a lot of tension. But aside from that, I think it's very important that you find the elements that link people together, that there's a commonality there. And very often you have, I know for example, in Great Britain, there's what we call a federation of Irish societies. Okay. So there's hundreds of Irish societies in England and Britain, and they are for culture, for sport, for food, for lots of different things. And then the federation just is a loose organization that kind of brings them all together and acts on their behalf. And I think there's an interesting possibilities and role for that. At the same time, you want people, it's like, I sometimes say you want to go an inch wide and a mile deep, and you want to go a mile wide and an inch deep. You kind of want to have both of these things going on at the same time.
Yeah.
But it is a mosaic. It's not a melting pot. Everything doesn't come, everybody's got different interests and angles. You need to be flexible enough, understanding enough, to be able to support these people. I mean, we have an interesting program in the Irish government called the Immigrant Support Program, okay, which actually gives funding to diaspora organizations around the world. So the diaspora for Ireland is very important. It always has been. It's part of our constitution. We have a minister, we have a national policy, and we have a budget. And so we will help a cultural organization in New York, or an old people's home in London, or an ex-prisoners group in Sydney, or whatever it is. And there's thousands of these groups, absolutely thousands of groups. So wow. And so they win, the government win a lot of credibility, because they're actually saying, we're going to use Irish taxpayers' money to fund these Irish people who are living outside of Ireland, which is not many countries do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that takes us to our next thematic focus, which is about funding. It's almost impossible to discuss about the diaspora and not touch on money. Although I belong to the school of thought that believes that the diaspora shouldn't just be seen, in isolation as a money spinner, but there's somewhat, some level of capital, which we know has to do with remittance. And in all honesty, it seems that some stakeholders, when they hear the diaspora, the only thing they hear is remittance. It's money. So that takes us to our next our next focal point. How does diaspora funding work, in your own opinion? How does it work?
Sure. So I think diasporas can be a fascinating source of financial aid in a number of different ways. Now, I'll just get the big elephant out of the room in a way is remittances. I mean, remittances is massive to Africa, but remittances are probably decreased by about 20%, which is about globally that's 100 billion decrease. Cool. So they're decreased because of COVID, because everybody is struggling. A lot of people have lost their jobs in the advanced countries they're working in, and they don't have as much money to send home. So I think that is a big crisis, and it's a big short-term crisis. I think this COVID thing is a massive global short-term crisis. But, and I often say this, the great virus which infected the world, the Spanish flu 100 years ago, and 50 million people died. It was incredibly awful, tragic, was followed by an extraordinary period of innovation, growth, and creativity. And what happened was that technology and pent-up capital were put to use. And we had mass electrification. We had the production of millions of motor cars, which resulted in highways and roads and theaters and restaurants and sports stadia. It led on to what we call the Roaring Twenties. So it was an incredible time. So the question is, what's going to happen after COVID? I think we're going to have a big global surge again. And I think it'll be driven by the same things. Technology, the rollout of global 5G broadband, so that what we're doing today can be done at an even more advanced level everywhere. I think in years to come, we look at what we're doing today and we think that was the Stone Age. That was so old-fashioned. True. So I think that would be a driver. I think a massive green economy would be a driver. And I think pent-up capital would be a driver. So that will filter back through into Africa, through its diaspora and its successful diaspora. So I think that they're the sorts of dynamics that are out there. But obviously, so that's remittances. You also have, philanthropy is a very interesting space for the following reason. The great source of financial philanthropy globally is the United States, which is part of their culture. But, and the United States now is a desperately unequal society. But there is a massive amount of money at the top end of society in the United States, bigger than any other time in its history. And so we are now facing what we call the intergenerational transfer of wealth. In other words, this money has to be transferred. And for a wealthy individual, and many of these could be Africans in the diaspora, they have three choices what to do with their wealth. The first choice, give it to their children. And that's what's going to happen. Kids are going to inherit a lot of money. But a lot of people don't want to give a ton of money to their kids because you destroy them. So if you don't give the money to your kids, the second option is you can give the money to the government in tax. And most Americans don't like that. And the third option, you can give it away. Museum, library, hospital, school, university, diaspora. So let me tell you a very brief example. We met a guy in the United States called Chuck Feeney, who was an Irish American and was on a plane one day sitting beside a president of an Irish university, got talking to him, decided to visit the university, and over the next number of years decided to fund third level education in Ireland. He was very wealthy. He gave $2 billion to universities in Ireland. Unbelievable. We would not be where we are today without this one guy. Go on YouTube, watch the videos about this man. Everything he did was anonymous. He was very quiet, a wonderful individual. He's actually still alive. He lives in San Francisco, but he believes in the old Andrew Carnegie mantra, which is you should give away all your wealth while you're alive. Give while you live is the concept. Yeah. It's a fascinating concept. He now lives in a rented house and he has a lovely idea. He wants to give his final check away the morning he passes away because he says he wants his check to the undertaker to bounce. Now, what a way to live your life. Wow. What a way to live your life. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett say this guy is their hero. He gave his money to diaspora. He was a diaspora member. He gave it back to his country he wasn't born in Ireland. It was his country of heritage and ancestry. Now he gave money in America and Vietnam and Australia. Yeah. So every country in their diaspora will have people, maybe not at that level, but people who are thinking about that. Because here's the thing. Life is about going from struggle to success and from success to significance. Yeah. And that's the period people begin to think, what are the things that matter? True. What shaped me? What made me as a person? And very often, it's their parents or their country or their origin or their ancestry or their heritage played a big role in that. And that's why I think philanthropy is going to soar over the next decades, because the money is so massive now. And it's unfair in many ways, but it is what it is. And I think there's great opportunities for all the African countries. I do a bit of work with the African Diaspora Network in Silicon Valley. A wonderful woman called Almaz there who runs that organization and has put together a group of Africans who work in high tech in Silicon Valley, and they're engaging back to their country of ancestry. So I think that's the way to go. And the organization I ran for 21 years, it started with a dinner in New York to bring the great successful Irish business people together. Yeah. The dinner was so unsuccessful. The only reason we had a second dinner a year later was to pay for the first dinner we had. That's, as you said, $1 billion ago. So we started at zero. We started minus zero. Yeah. And I love the story because, I believe a very simple thing. Nobody ever started a large organization. Yeah. When you think about it. The son of a Syrian migrant, 21-year-old Steve Jobs, started a company with a 27-year-old Steve Wozniak in a garage in Cupertino in California. That company is called Apple. Everything starts at nothing. Hewlett and Packard started in a shed. Disney started in an outhouse. Amazon in somebody's front room. Starbucks in a coffee shop. You know, everything starts at nothing. And that's so exciting for people in the diaspora now.
Sure. I mean, you did touch on, the experience you had with the Irish billionaire. Some of my colleagues from friends in Nigeria are also on board, my co-founder, and we did have an interesting experience also with a Nigerian in Europe. This is somebody who's been here for over 40 years, and he called us to his house, I think about 2 years ago, and he said, I've made a lot of money, I've done great things in Europe, but I would like to task your generation with something. I'm going to test you with about, I think, between 1 million to 10 million euros. And what I want you to do is just get this fund from me and try to institute a process in Nigeria where young entrepreneurs can get this loan for free. And the only thing I want back in return is that they pay back. So no interest, no collateral. And the reason why we've not launched that is because we've not been able to solve the puzzle of ensuring people pay back. So, I mean, our name is quite, I'm saying this because there might be people on the call from Nigeria will probably be able to partner with us on that. But this is to let us know that indeed philanthropy is a way to go, and not just Europeans. There are many Africans who already have moved from the level of success, like you said, and they're already entering the level of significance. And it's about, I just want to give back to the society. I want to give back to my home country, to my country of origin, without being there myself. So interesting to see that you mentioned some of these inspiring stories. And just to put this in context, when it comes to remittance, I mean, to let people understand why this is quite important for those who don't know, that a PwC Nigerian report did mention that in 2018, 83% of the remittances from Nigerians abroad was equivalent to, Nigerian remittances abroad was equivalent to 83% of the federal government budget in 2018. And the same year, that same remittance was 11 times that of foreign direct investments. So as a matter of fact, today, it's been seen that remittances are superseding or surpassing official development aid to not just Nigeria, but to some African countries, and also now going beyond foreign direct investment. So it's very critical that we touch, on remittance and how this can be used, not just for consumption purpose, but how the diaspora can also leverage on their capital prowess to support projects that are sustainable back at home. And just a direct question to you. You raised, with the Irish funds, you were able to raise $250 million. And that is a very landmark achievement. And there are many organizations here probably also working with their government agencies and trying to replicate the same model. What were the secrets, or what are the secrets that helped you able to convince the diaspora? And what really helped you achieve that kind of financial feat?
Well, I think there's probably three elements you have to have if you want to raise money philanthropically. And by the way, just to pick up on your point, what we discovered in our process, and this took 30 years, we discovered that philanthropy was a portal, that we could introduce people to our country through philanthropy and then open the portal and get them involved in investment and trade and culture and sport and mentoring and volunteering and all sorts of different things. So it's a very interesting introduction point to bring people engaged and run lots of events. We ran lots of events. We were always looking for overachievers. We were looking for overachievers in the diaspora. We were looking for overachievers back home in Ireland, and we wanted to put them together. And we found that was dynamite when we got that kind of stuff going. So, they were the sorts of, if you like, processes we put in place. We ran lots and lots of events. We ran all sorts of things just to bring and identify people, bring them together. And then the killer application was always to get them to come back and visit. Yeah. Come back. So we ran annual trips, lots of visits and trips throughout the year. One of the interesting things the Irish government did a few years ago was called The Gathering, where they actually said, we're going to invite the diaspora to come back to Ireland. And they spent 2 years preparing this for a certain year. And 300,000 people came back. They had 5,000 events organized.
Did,
It was
did,
incredible.
did you say 300,000?
Yeah, people
Wow.
all throughout the whole year, they came to Ireland. And many of them said, you know what, it was always on my bucket list. I always wanted to do it, but I never got around to doing it. And then you invited me. You, the Irish government, we invited people.
Wow.
It was an extraordinary success. What happened was people established new networks, new connections. People went to all around the country to the different places where their ancestors had come from, and they saw the church and the church records, and they saw the schools that their grandparents went to. There's a simple concept, and many countries have now done the same thing. I have to admit, I'm a founder member of a group called CASE, and CASE stands for Copy and Steal Everything. Figure out what country is doing this well, and see, could you do something similar? So the country that's always been the leader in this space for a long, long time is Israel. So they've done lots of interesting things that we can learn from. At the same time, I was helping out just recently an organization called Grow Home, which is to help Palestinians around the world to invest in tech companies in places like Ramallah in Palestine. And it was driven very much by young people. So I think an exciting possibility now is to really galvanize and turn on the young, the next generation, because there is a concern that they may be less enthusiastic about the home country than their parents. But I actually find it the opposite. We set up the young leaders in the Ireland funds, and these were young, often professional people who were starting out in their career. They realized that they were building a network, and we were offering the opportunity to build a network in, say, New York City. And that's very powerful. And I'm a huge fan of building and teaching people how to be good at networking, how to network outside your silo, how to network with diversity and inclusion, and to build a strong and diverse network, which will guarantee you'll survive and thrive. So these were the sorts of dynamics. And I think the next generation could be fascinating because they totally understand technology. They're born into it. They're digital natives. And technology will be the big game changer. So I think that we need to put resources in this area. We need governments to do that, but we need international institutions to do that. Like you mentioned, IOM, the UN or the World Bank, they should be investing in these areas because I think that is going to be the game changer for the next generation.
Very, very, very much agree with that. And I did like that concept. CASE, K-A-S-E, copy and steal everything.
Yeah.
So why should you reinvent the wheel? I mean, if you can.
New under the sun.
Interested. Yeah, please, if you do have questions for Kingsley or myself, please drop that in the chat box. And we're going into the final part of today's discuss. Just as mentioned, we're focusing on 4 major things. The first is about locating the diaspora. Where are they? How do we find them? And Kingsley has done justice to that. We talked about how to engage the diaspora productively, and we looked at both the public sector and also the private sector and how people can foster engagement with the diaspora. And then we just talked about the diaspora funding, respect to remittances, philanthropy, and that leads us to the final focal point for today's discuss. So Kingsley, when it comes to the global sphere, the world has moved from development as it was. The focus is now on sustainable development. And in the same vein, it's no longer sufficient to have lofty diaspora programs without thinking sustainability. That's why I must commend, organizations such as ADEPT, in Europe, focusing on amplifying the influence and the impact of African diaspora organizations across Africa and Europe. So sustainability is now the name of the game, not just project, not just initiatives. And so the question to you is, how do we sustain the impact of diaspora organizations and initiatives on the medium and long term? How do we sustain that?
Well, I think it's important. I think countries could only make one mistake, and the mistake would be not to have a diaspora policy and strategy. Yeah. So I think it has to come from the very top. I think governments have to, I call it a horrible verb, to diasporize. In other words, diaspora is not about just the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's your Ministry of Agriculture. It's your Ministry of Economics. It's your Ministry of Law. It's all these different things. Everybody in government has to buy in to the concept of diaspora and ensure that that works. I think economic sustainability, critical to that is FDI, foreign direct investment, or we used to call it DDI, diaspora direct investment. So what we found with our diaspora, they had certain things that other people, other investors didn't have. For example, they were highly motivated to invest back in the home country, despite the challenges, and there's lots of challenges. They had knowledge and expertise in the country they live in and back in their home country. So that's a kind of unique combination. They had financial networks. You know, we always sought out what we called A&I, people of affluence and influence. So we were looking for people who are successful. And these people, they want to take the standards that they use to be successful in their host country. They want to take those standards and apply them back in their home country. That's often a challenge, but that's what they want to do. And they realized that that was really critically important. So looking for FDI, which is so important in the world. Like last week, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a company called Stripe in the United States. That was set up by two kids, two 16-year-old boys from Limerick in Ireland, from the village, who were smart. They were very smart. They went to Harvard, dropped out, set up the company. Last week, they announced 1,000 jobs back in Ireland. Wow. Diaspora-driven investment. Now, all the economics have to work. Everything has to work. You need the infrastructure that works. But they made that choice to go back to their country of heritage. Their parents live there. Many of their kids at school, friends are there. And that was a massive vote. So DDI, this sort of subset of FDI is fascinating. So when I worked for the IDA, my job was to get foreign direct investment for Ireland. I sought out members of the diaspora, and I used to call them tipping agents. These were people who could tip a deal in Ireland's direction. Now, sometimes they weren't the people with the resources, but they knew the people with the resources. Yeah. Because we knew that to win an FDI decision was often very marginal. The difference between winning and losing was tiny, but the implications were enormous, gigantic. Yeah. If you won, fantastic. If you came second, you know what you got, baby? Nothing, zero, zip. So it was very competitive. So we saw the diaspora, we used to call it the nudge factor. That could nudge a deal in Ireland's direction. Yeah. And we have over 1,000 foreign companies based in Ireland selling into Europe. You know, and these are all the great tech companies. But we were an agricultural country. That's what we were. 30 years ago, we were a farming society. True. Now we are one of the great high-tech societies of the world. That took time, and in there was a real role for diaspora.
Yeah, very, very good point on diaspora as a tipping agent, and also they come in as a nudge factor. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, just also touch on that's also what Friends of Nigeria has been all about for the past few years. Over the past 4 or 5 years, we've had trade missions, based on our influence and our repertoire of network here within France and Europe. We're able to lead trade missions back to Nigeria with French investors looking forward to, and also European investors trying to get into the market. And also, we've also been able to mirror the same ideal. We also bring sometimes public sector and private sector agents back to France to be able to meet with their own direct partners. So beyond events, this is what we've also been doing. But this idea of nudging and also tipping agents categorize exactly what we do. Respect to activities. Also touching on what you said with respect to sustainability. We've talked about the role of the government, which is to ensure that policies are, put in place to allow for sustainability of diaspora initiatives. Now let's put the touch on diaspora organizations themselves abroad. When it comes to also brilliant initiatives, we've seen some initiatives that did not survive 5 years, 10 years. They were brilliant, but there's always a very wide gap between the old generation and the new generation. The transition is always almost not possible. So what would be your advice to associations, organizations who are diasporan based and seeking to be able to be in existence for the next decades? and ensuring that there's no gap in how the transition occurs?
So I'd start by using the dirty word money. Money is the oxygen for these organizations to survive. If they have no money, it's very hard to survive. So that's something that they have to get good at. They have to get good at philanthropy and fundraising, which is what we did. And what we asked our diaspora to do was to support our organization, and they did very generously. So that's very important. I think there's reasons why diaspora groups fail, and there's reasons why they succeed. One of them is very often diaspora initiatives are like fireworks, you know? They have a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm. They go, wow, and then they just die. And they usually die because they run out of money, you know? And also we tend to be simplistic in our thinking about diaspora groups, and we tend to be what the Americans use fuzzy math. In other words, we say there's 2.5 million Jamaicans live in the United States. If every one of them gave $10 a month, we'd solve unemployment in Jamaica. Well, it doesn't work like that. Life is not like that. Here's the brutal fact of life about diaspora engagement. 20 people in your diaspora can fundamentally shift and change your country in a dramatic way.
Wow.
The question is, who are those 20 people? Where are they? What are they doing? And that takes a long process of cultivation to bring them on board. So I think that's one of the challenges. I think capacity building for the organizations is a challenge. I think, and one of the things the Irish government did a few years ago, they invited all the groups around the world to send representatives back to Ireland, and they trained them. They trained them how to run your organization, how to use technology, how to raise money, how to be well governed, you know. So governance is often an issue because we have founder syndrome. You know, the founder never leaves, you know, etc. Very often they don't get the next generation involved, so that's the kind of a particular challenge. Sometimes there's resentment in the diaspora towards the home country. I mentioned sometimes there's political difficulties and issues. You know, there's some facts of life about running these organizations which are challenging, but they're all solvable, they're all doable. You need 3 things to be successful in the diaspora for the home country. You need a great case, great cause, powerfully articulated. So everybody's got to know, what is it that you're trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? And it's got to be great. We call it a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, you know, something really fantastic. The second thing you need is a constituency. There's got to be a group of people who care about what you do. But the sub-question to the constituency is, who are they, where are they, what are they doing? So you need the data. So data is critical. And the third thing you need is leadership, you know, and that's so important, leadership. Finding great individuals who will step up and do great things. And there's a whole series of characteristics to these leaders in diasporas, which are kind of common throughout the world. That's what I've noticed. And you need to have these characteristics. And you need to find exceptional people who are willing to do exceptional work.
Wow. I think you captured that. If I would summarize all that you've said, it's not really about the numbers in terms of quantity, other than it's about the quality of the people. And that's one of the things I think Friends of Nigeria got right. Beyond the fact that we boast of many Nigerians in diaspora in France and across Europe, behind the scenes are just few quality members. And some of them are on this call, also our mentors on this call, on this webinar, who are actually the propeller behind all that we do. And so when we talk about our impact with respect to what we do with the French government and also the Nigerian government, who I must confess has been very supportive. You know that when it comes to the issue of when we did the diaspora bond, Nigeria was quite successful as raising the bond, and also the policy has been gotten right with the president appointing you know, the person in Mrs. Honorable Abike Dabiri, who is in charge of the Nigerian Diaspora Commission. Prior to that, there were little or no engagement within diaspora first, but with our leadership, we've been able to leverage on the policy to support all that we do. So I think it's quite important that organizations and associations understand that it's not about the numbers, having 2,000, 3,000 diaspora members, but in terms of actually narrowing down to the quality, if you really want to be sustainable. Quality board of advisors, quality team members, and quality believers in the dream who also put their money where their mouth is. I think that's the case too. So without further ado, we have about 11 minutes. I'm just going to go. I think we have some questions here from some of the audience. Somebody's asking, okay, I'm just going to read out. Kingsley's points on home governments having consistency in building trust and listening, in particularly noteworthy given the incidences in Nigeria in the last 1 week, which seems okay. How does diaspora organization approach collaborating to amplify impact without government support? So this guy is asking, how do we amplify impact without government support? Is that possible? I think you touched on a bit on that on fundraising. Yeah, that's what he's asking.
I mean, very often these diaspora groups are quite competitive, because very often they think we're the group to represent the diaspora, not the other group. So I think it needs a degree of collaboration and cooperation. It needs that kind of federation approach. It needs people to decide what's our particular niche, Is it business? Is it culture? Is it sport? Yeah. Is it community? Is it, so what we found in Ireland, I mean, we've got 7,000 Irish pubs around the world. Can you imagine? So they have an entity. And then we have 500 Irish Gaelic football clubs who play Gaelic football, but they've become kind of like community centers. Yeah. And so we've got specialist Irish dancing clubs around the world, and they all kind of meet on a general level, at a federal level. At the same time, they do their own thing. So I think you want to try and establish good relations, but also have a federal approach.
Indeed, good relations, federal approach. Thank you. Somebody else is asking, I think almost in line with the same question, can people in diaspora bypass their government of origin and still try to make some impact? How do individuals and group coordinate this effort? I think it's in line with what you just. So how do people abroad, diaspora members, coordinate themselves to amplify their efforts with bypassing the government? I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people are a little bit suspicious of government organizations running social activities or community groups. I think they'd prefer to see them run by their own community, but having good relationships with government. It's back to the implementer versus facilitator debate. And I think that by and large, people are attracted to organizations in the diaspora because of the quality of the people involved, Sure. And I think they join these groups for self-interested reasons, and it helps them in a network in their own hometown. If they're in Seattle or in San Francisco, it's very good for them to belong to a local group that is from their own kind of place back home, etc. I find that, we all need networks. It's all about building networks. And it's just another addition. It's quite hard going to another country as a migrant, setting up. So you need your help. We often say you have to send the elevator back down, help the other people come up. That's important.
Indeed. Okay, just another interesting question from one of our board members, actually at Friends of Nigeria, Dr. Emmanuel Eager. Having moved from agriculture to high-tech, what is the position of our agriculture now in the Irish economy? And what advice would you give to Nigeria as it's turned its back on agriculture because of oil and gas?
Well, that's a really interesting question. So, we didn't move away from agriculture. Our agriculture now is high tech, Yeah. So we used high tech to maximize the returns from our agriculture. So Ireland produces enough food to feed 10 times the population of Ireland. Yeah. So we're a major exporter. But the groups who are doing the export, they're big organizations with turnovers of 10 billion a year, very sophisticated farming techniques, and they've taken all the technology and applied it to agriculture. So they're not competing forces, they're collaborative forces.
Wow, indeed. Okay, I think we've practically covered the major focal points, which centers on these 4 things: locating the diaspora, where are they, how can they be found? Kingsley also touched on engaging diaspora productively, how can they be engaged? And the third point we focused on was how diaspora funding works. And then the last part was sustaining diaspora impact. So before I put in some, aftermath slides, which has to do with contact details for Kingsley and myself, I would like to ask Kingsley if he has any other thoughts that you'd like to leave with the audience before I, pull out the slides to let them be able to reach us after this webinar?
I think this is a really exciting time, a really exciting topic. We will get through COVID-19 eventually in the next year or so, and I think we will pass into a period of enormous growth and creativity. And I think that's we have an old expression in Ireland: don't get down, get ready. And the expression we have in Ireland: when business is down, that's when you paint the shop, right? So when times are tough, get ready, because things will change. So I think that's exciting. I think there's over 100 countries around the world now are engaging their diaspora. So what they see as what were once lost actors are now national assets. Yeah. So now you can live a hyphenated life. You can live in Southern California, but could be completely engaged with Ghana, Nigeria, or Kenya. And you can be both. You can do the two things. You're not being disloyal to Southern California, but we do say something interesting, which I think is fascinating for the future of Africa. It's now more important what you do than where you are. Yeah. And that's what COVID has forced upon us. You don't know where I am. You don't even know if I have my pajamas on, do you? You know, you just don't know. And so it's more important what you do than where you are. So now we say, in the old days, your geography dictated your identity. True. Now we say geography is history. That's the reality. That's very exciting. So you could run an incredible business out of Nairobi or Lagos or somewhere that has a global footprint, that is active all around the world. Sure. And you use your diaspora in Birmingham and Toronto and Rio de Janeiro. And they become your eyes and ears and your scouts and spies. And that's the excitement of diaspora. In the old days, when you emigrated, you were gone and you were gone forever. Sure. My great-grandmother had 3 kids, went to Australia, and she never saw them again. Never saw them again. Wow. Those days have gone, you know. We're now over and back. We live hyphenated lives. We are, you know, transnational in our activities. And so I think that opens up opportunities. And everything, and a lot of this will be technology driven. Even remittances, when we get total digitization, you know, will be much cheaper, you know, and remittances will come back again and will soar again.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Very, very precise closing thoughts. It's not just about where you are anymore. It's about what you do. And that's why today we can have somebody based in Paris, another person based in Dublin, all talking about what's going to happen in Africa in the coming months with respect to diaspora. So it's not about location anymore. That has been collapsed. And I also liked talking about your course that I would advise everybody here to actually take. I'm going to put up the slides about the diaspora engagement course put on by the Networking Institute. That's where Kingsley works. And, you know, it made this reference also that even though we have the migration seems to, you know, put the broad burner about people being scattered. When we hear migration, we hear scatter. But when we talk about diaspora, it's about a confluence. It's about bringing people who are dispersed, you know, sharing common values. So while migration might sound offensive, and it looks like it has so many negative parameters around it, diaspora is what is bringing that positivity, that there's nothing bad in migration as long as we focalize the torchlight on diaspora members who can be scattered, but yet they are bounded by one common vision to still be able to support back their countries of origin. And so on this note, I want to say thank you to Kingsley, to your team. And I'm very sure this is just going to be the first in a series of engagements. So we'll be happy to engage you further. I'm going to put out the slides for you all to see, you know, reach out to either of us. We'll be happy to take this conversation further. So on the first slide, you have the online diaspora engagement course, and that you'll find on the networkinginstitute.com. For being part of this event, the Networking Institute will be gracious, or has been gracious to give you a 20% discount. So all you need to do is to log in into this website, the networkinginstitute.com, and you'll be able to take that course with a 20% discount using the coupon code Africa 2021, AFRICA 2021. Once you add that code to the fee, you get a discount of 20%. And I must mention that this course is quite insightful. It's quite practical. If you stakeholder in diaspora and engagement, then I encourage you to you know, be a part and take advantage of this course that the Networking Institute has put together. And on that note also, for those of us who would like to get in touch with Friends of Nigeria, here's a website, friendsofnigeria.net. So if you go on our website, you'll be able to see all that we are, all that we do. And with the website, you can also connect to us throughout various social media handles. And also our events website is spotlightnigeriafrance.com. Spotlightnigeriafrance.com. That's our flagship annual event. So you'll get to meet, to be able to connect with us further. And also, if you'd like to connect with us personally, you have my email address there, and you also have Kingsley's email address here also. And you also reach out to us directly on LinkedIn, Kingsley Aikins. You just need to, just type in and you can be sure there's just one diaspora veteran, you see. So you won't be mistaking him for someone else. And then my full name's on LinkedIn, Abiodun Odunuga. So you have all contact details. We'll be happy to engage with you. For us, this is just also a means to an end goal at the end of the day, is to be able to work with those of us who are interested in collaborating and seeing how we can leverage on best practices, leverage on share ideas. Like Kingsley did mention, it's a strategy called KISS, copy and steal everything. So if you're ready to copy and steal things that could work with respect to your diaspora, whether you're from Madagascar, from Ghana, from Ethiopia, or across the sub-Saharan Africa, the Network Institute will be happy to further this discussion with you offline. Once again, thank you, Kingsley. Thank you to your team. And definitely we look forward to engaging further and see how we could deepen the impact with respect to diaspora in Africa. Thank you for coming on board. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Abiodun. And do connect everybody with me on LinkedIn. I love building up my LinkedIn network, so it'd be great to do that.
All right. All right.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
everyone. Yes. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.